today, one of our most enjoyable experiences to date has been our trip south of the border.
Yes, and we are super excited to be able to share some of our experiences in Baja, Mexico with you today.
So for those of you that are traveling in RVs and want to up the adventure and find some more exciting places to travel, Baja offers so many great experiences, and it's also a safe place.
We have been full-time traveling now for 2 years with our son Tucker, who is also 2.
And it's been great, both for him and us, to have this time to have quality family time, to travel and have these amazing adventures. We began in the Pacific Northwest, up there at Oregon and Washington. We've been all the way across to the East Coast to Florida, back to Oregon, down into Baja, Mexico, up to, but not across the Canadian border, and then back down again. So we've been all over. We've had so many great opportunities to explore the country and have some really cool experiences. Mexico in general has this vibe of being a dangerous place to go to, and there's danger anywhere you go, but most of that status is from mainland Mexico. Baja is totally separated, from mainland Mexico for the most part, and so the whole area of Baja, we had great experiences and no safety concerns. But we do want to share with you some of the things that we prepared for the trip.
Okay, cars.
Yeah. We're going to Mexico.
So nervous.
One of the first things we did to prepare for our Baja, Mexico trip was research the different border crossing checkpoints. And some of them are busier than others. Some of them are open 24 hours and some of them are closed at nighttime. We found out through research, and this may or may not be the same when you go, but Mexicali East border crossing is a lesser used area. It's kind of outside of the big town of Mexicali, which is a big town on the border. And so by going to this border crossing, we were able to avoid a lot of that traffic, but we did make one mistake.
Having insurance for your vehicles is very important before you cross the border. We went through Discover Baja Travel Club to get our Mexican insurance, and you have to have insurance for every vehicle that has a motor. So for us, that was our RV, the truck we were towing, as well as Jesse's dirt bike. The problem that we had is I messed up our names when I initially did insurance, and the morning of us planning to cross the border, we realized this, but I called Discover Baja. They were excellent, they were thorough, they were quick at fixing my mistake. We got our new paperwork, we printed it all out, but this delayed our crossing. So we ended up crossing closer to afternoon, when they really recommend you cross earlier in the morning. Yeah. Luckily, we got through. It was an incredible, it will never happen again. Our border crossing was very easy. There was no one in line.
Yeah, so as you do your research, all the guidebooks will say, hey, be there early in the morning. That way you can get through the debacle of showing all your documents and still have time, because essentially some of those border towns are unsafe come nightfall. And so you want to budget enough time to get through the border crossing, through the border town and onto safer areas to overnight.
This is awesome. There's it still took a long time, but there's nobody in line. There's no wait.
Okay.
All right, so we are literally just finished up with customs. There is very little traffic and short lines, and our worries about coming through later in the morning were nothing to worry about.
Null and void.
So now we're gonna regroup, we're gonna figure out our route to San Felipe and get out of here.
Wonder why they even have them if this is normal.
We're in Mexico in our RV.
Oh my gosh.
I'm excited now.
Me too. I'm so glad we decided to come today because that was, oh man.
Nothing.
But this is one advantage of doing this homework ahead of time. But by having that quiet, lesser used border crossing, even arriving there later than planned, towards lunchtime, it didn't bite us in the butt where it might have a busy crossing.
That's true. I mentioned having insurance. You do want to make sure that all of your documentation you have multiple copies of. So have multiple copies of your vehicle insurance, of your passports, and also you need to print out the form. It's on the Mexican government website that you need to fill out in order to cross over, and you'll take all of that, this huge packet of paperwork, you'll take that inside with you for them to go over and review.
Yeah, and it was pretty straightforward. Even with limited Spanish, we were able to communicate and get some documents stamped. You'll have to go to, typically there's a bank there at the crossing, so you go, you pay the bank the fees for the documents, they stamp it saying you've paid, you go back to the first place you were at to begin with. It's kind of a convoluted process, but you'll go back and forth. It worked out well because we had our baby boy at the time. Tucker was what?
He was
6 months old. So mommy and baby stayed in the RV while I was able to take our documents. And yeah, they were very accommodating, so it worked out very well.
And then just before we left, they did do a walkthrough initially, make sure we didn't have anything we weren't supposed to have. But as Jesse said, they were very friendly, very helpful, and we were in and out of there in about an hour.
Yeah, it went very well. The one thing that they were actually very...
A stickler about.
Yeah, they wanted to see our vehicle titles, and they wanted to make sure that the VINs, that the vehicle ID numbers, matched the paperwork as what was actually on the vehicle. That was like the one thing they cared about. They didn't, we thought they might go through our RV. We heard there's, limitations on bringing in alcohol, tobacco, any certain, products. And we figured they might come and do like an inspection. They walked in, looked around, but then they wanted to see the VINs. For those of you who want more details, there's a lot more of this information will be on our website and in some of our videos about Baja. But to make a long story short, before traveling into Mexico, we made sure we had Verizon service, and we made sure that we contacted them to, I think it was a $10 upgrade per month to have access to use our phones on the networks. Verizon has a partnership deal where I think it was Telcel and Verizon worked together. So we didn't have to do anything too crazy, just pay, I think it was $10 a month for the extra service. And then we were able to use our phones as normal. And most of the service there was 3G, which allowed us to use our phones for navigation, which was
Oh my gosh, we were so thankful that we'd done that prior to crossing the border. Almost immediately upon crossing the border, we got text messages saying, hey, welcome to Mexico, welcome, thank you for using Telcel as your service carrier, and we were able to use our maps to get to San Felipe, which is where we were headed for our first night. Highly recommend doing that. After leaving Mexicali, we saw miles of empty, mountainous desert. It was beautiful. Even the areas where sand covered parts of the road. But now we had to cross through a military checkpoint.
San Felipe.
San Felipe de vacation?
The soldier that came aboard was very friendly. He asked a few questions, such as where we were going and for how long. During the inspection, he chose one random door to open. That door ended up showing him our bathroom. For those of you with children, if you have not yet traveled to Baja, we highly recommend it. Do not let having kids deter you from traveling there. We had a wonderful experience. We took Tucker to our pediatrician and asked him if he had any recommendations. The only recommendation at that time was for him to get flu shots. I did, of course, bring as many familiar baby products that I could since we had our house with us. But really I didn't have to worry about that. The stores, everything has basically the same thing that you would buy in the States. Brands might be a little bit different. Formula was the biggest thing. I did bring enough formula with us. I didn't want to have to change brands, but other than that, diapers, wipes, everything else you will be able to find down there. The biggest thing that I will give you a heads up on, the Mexicans that we encountered were very family oriented, and it was not uncommon for someone to come up and they'll just hold their hands out and expect you to hand them their baby, and they'll hold the baby and they would love on Tucker. And we would go out to dinner. The waitress would take our order and then she'd take Tucker and walk around with him, and we'd look over and then the cook would be holding him, and then I don't know, a member of the band would be holding him, but they do that so that you can eat your dinner as a couple. And it was just mind-blowing, and it was horrifying for me at first, but everyone means well. They just love kids, love family. I loved having that experience with us, with Tucker. I highly recommend going, even with kids.
Yeah, I think that's one of those cases where having kids is actually an advantage to go to Baja, because it's that much easier. There's such a family-oriented culture, and
if possible, they're kind of more welcoming to you when you have children. Whereas if you're just some random gringo couple walking around in Mexico, because we had a kid, they're like, oh, hey!
So unfortunately, we don't have our dog anymore. She passed away, but we had a wonderful dog, Nutmeg. She was a black lab. We loved her so much, and she had the most amazing time in Mexico. We were actually on the fence if we should bring her or not, because she had some health concerns with cancer. Without getting into details though, we decided, hey, we have the medicine she needs. We're taking her with us. You know, we were her family, and we took her down to Baja. So in order to get her across the border, we needed to have her immunizations, and especially a current rabies vaccination with paperwork to prove that she had that rabies vac. And so we did all the stuff to make sure that she was covered, but, and this is kind of true a lot of times, we do all this work, we get to the border crossing, and all they wanted to do is look at the paperwork for the rabies, verify that it was in date, and good enough. All the extra work I had done was kind of for nothing, but I still would do it again. I'd recommend, dot your I's, cross your T's, in case you do find someone who's a stickler.
But those health certificates with the rabies, you do have a time frame of when she was checked, your dog was checked, versus when you cross the border. I think it's about a week. And any of the veterinarians along the border on the state side will understand what you're talking about. If you say, hey, I need the health certificate to cross the border into Mexico, they will understand exactly what you need, and they will give you the paperwork.
And it's great, there's no quarantine or anything. Essentially, as long as you have that proof of vaccinations and your dog appears healthy, you can come right across the border with your dog today. So that was pretty cool.
Yep. The biggest concern crossing into Mexico was probably just the other dogs. There are many, many feral dogs throughout Mexico.
Yeah, and so the concern is if those dogs were to transmit diseases to your dog. So it's definitely worth it to have those shots. We didn't have any problems. In fact, our dog on many beaches would play with the other dogs, but we were always a little bit weary. Some dogs looked kind of scraggly, and you want to make sure that your pups or any other pets are safe, you know.
Another thing we did was get her a Spanish tag along with her English tag. So we had a tag made up that said in Spanish, I think we had a reward if found, and then we had our phone numbers on there just in case you want to be covered.
Yeah, so in Spanish it said reward if found in Spanish, but it also had, our phone numbers are different if you're calling from Mexico. So we added those I think it was 0 or +1, but we added those numbers in front of our phone numbers so somebody in Mexico could call the number and contact us.
For making camping reservations, we did make a reservation once. We stayed in San Felipe our first night crossing the border at Victor's RV Park. I had contacted them a few weeks before we crossed the border via Facebook. They were very prompt in replying, and they had availability, so there were no issues. But every other RV park we stayed at, which was really only 2 or 3 during our stay in Mexico, they all had availability. There were no issues with finding a spot to stay, although most of the time we did prefer to boondock. So we didn't really make too many reservations, but the parks we did stay at always had availability. They were very accommodating, and they generally all spoke English. Someone there would speak English.
Yeah, it makes it very easy to communicate, and also really helped us to not have to have set plans, because you can typically just show up and if they have a spot, great. If not, they'll make room for you. Was our experiences, and you can kind of, with that in mind, travel Baja at your own pace. So if you want to drag your feet a few extra days or leave a couple days early to your next spot, it's not a problem.
Posible mañana. That's the Baja phrase.
So most of our time in Baja was boondocking. We did stay, as Jenny mentioned, Victor's RV park, which is San Felipe. We also stayed at an RV park in La Paz and Todos Santos. So there are a few. There aren't a lot of RV parks though in Baja, for better or worse. There are some, paid dry camping areas where they bring services to you, and that was one of our favorites, in fact. And you'll hear all about it if you start researching Baja, Mexico RVing. But Bahia Conception is incredibly beautiful. But you pull your RV out just on the beach, and if you need water or other services, they'll actually bring that to you, pump out your tanks. There's plenty of people that will service your RV for a fee.
And someone would come by your rig each day to collect the nightly fee, which was 50 pesos?
It ranged from $5 to $10 a night, US.
Yeah. So it's not technically an RV park, but you are paying to camp. So for finding, especially for finding boondocking spots, we use the iOverlander app quite often, but they do list paid camping as well as RV parks. So that's a good app to use no matter how you're going to be traveling throughout Baja.
What's really great about Baja is, in our experience, we could boondock almost anywhere. And in fact, typically the only places that had signs posted that said you couldn't be there was Gringo property, which is kind of ironic. But most of the local Baja Mexicans, they didn't typically care if we'd camp out on a beach area that wasn't somebody's backyard.
The biggest thing is clean up after yourself. Don't leave a mess.
Yeah. And so we made sure to leave no trace. We had no problems camping out on the beaches as we went up and down through Baja. I think one of the coolest things that you're going to experience when you go down to Baja is just the people and just the random things that just happen. One day we were on this amazing beach. It was a little oasis. It's all desert, and there's just this little area. There's a lagoon with some palm trees right on the ocean.
Called Palm Beach.
And at Palm Beach, we're hanging out with Tucker, playing in the ocean, and I found a nice set of binoculars on the rocks. And so we saw just two older couples off to the side and said, "Hey, did you guys by chance lose some binoculars?" It was their binoculars, which started a conversation. And lo and behold, one of the couples had been there a long time and owned properties throughout the area, and they offered us a beachfront parking spot on the property they owned, right in the middle of this $1 million housing area. And so we had this $1 million view, by just from this chance encounter with people we met. And that happened a lot, just meeting people who know somebody, and oh, hey, I have a spot for your RV over here, or you can park over there.
And not even just parking, information about restaurants or things to check out, places to go. It is to your best interest to just talk to people. And I'm awful at this. Jesse is a master.
So let's talk about the seasons in Baja.
I think generally it's, November through March is the ideal time.
Yeah, that's the prime time, and you'll have a lot of people there as well, other RVers, but it was never overly crowded for us. And that was like the prime time when all the snowbirds and everyone wants to migrate down into Mexico.
Yeah. Now we got a late start. We were in Baja February through April. It was still nice, weather was still great. We actually had the opportunity, as we were headed south down Baja, we saw a lot of rigs headed north. And so we didn't have a whole lot of competition when it came to parking and boondocking and RV spots. But I will say, we did stay on both the Sea of Cortez side as well as the Pacific side. I recommend staying on the Pacific side if you're going to be in Baja in April. It was comfortable, the weather was perfect, it was a little bit warm, and there was no breeze on the Sea of Cortez side. We stayed at Bahia Conception.
Yeah, come April, that part of the coast just starts to get pretty hot, and in fact, it was so hot it was uncomfortable to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And so, but the catch though is on the Pacific side it was just fine. So I think you probably could go to Baja year round, but keep in mind that as you get past wintertime, some areas will be less comfortable than other Pacific areas.
But we were able to run our generator. I did apologize to the tent campers that were staying nearby, but there are other RVs parked at Bahia Conception that also ran their generators, so it probably wouldn't be a huge deal.
Yeah, we had a baby. I think Tucker was 9 months old at the time. We're like, we're not gonna make him. If it was just us, we'd probably just sweat and turn on the fan. But with the baby on board, we decided to crank it up and make it comfortable.
Crank it down.
So a big thing with RVers is fuel and transportation. And so what was interesting to find out when you go into Mexico, and this is actually kind of, I think they're at the cusp of changing this, but for a long time now, the fuel has been owned by the Mexican government. So the Pemex or Pemex gas stations, they're government gas stations, and the prices are fixed. They're kind of like a set price. You do want to make sure here's one tip that could save you a lot of money. Before they stick that nozzle in your fuel tank, you need to visually look at the fuel pump and make sure it's been zeroed out.
Yeah.
A very common thing that happens there, which we didn't have this experience, but we had heard about this happening, was that they can have the pump already let's say $100 already on there and start pumping and give you $20 more of fuel and charge you $120 for that $20 of fuel. So you want to make sure the pump's zeroed out before they start pumping. And we did that. We'd make sure it was zero. We had no problems. But you got two conversions. First, the fuel is in liters. And second, the price is in pesos. And so it can be a little bit confusing trying to figure out how much you're paying per gallon for fuel. In our case, it was diesel. But for diesel, we found that throughout Baja, and the prices changed a little bit, but throughout Baja, we were paying 20 to 30 cents per gallon more than in the States. So it cost more, but it wasn't substantially more.
Yeah.
And Baja is not that big overall, so if you're traveling slowly, we didn't see much of a difference in our overall fuel costs.
There is a stretch of about 250 miles if you're going to go all the way down Baja where there is no gas stations or diesel, nothing that is available. It's around Guerrero Negro, and as I said, it's about a 250 mile stretch with nothing. So make sure you fill up beforehand. We'll include that on our website. We're also doing a series on our time in Baja that will go into more detail about little tidbits of information like that, which could make or break your day or your trip.
In our case, it might make you have to skip showers for a day or two. Oh my
gosh, we did not plan for that 250 mile stretch. We had enough gas, but we didn't have enough water. Don't make our mistake.
Some friends of ours we met there are also YouTubers and have a channel called Live and Give 4x4. They have a newer Mercedes-Benz diesel. It's actually a pretty cool off-road RV, but theirs requires the ultra-low sulfur diesel, ULSD. And so they had problems finding gas stations that would offer that fuel, and that kind of became a problem. So something to keep in mind as you're going down there, see if you need that type of diesel, and if so, do some research and make sure that it's going to work out for you. In their case, they were able to find places that had it, and they were just fine.
If you are planning a trip to Baja and want more information, check out our website as well as our YouTube channel. We're going to have a series. We have lots of resources listed, like the guidebooks that we used and the apps that we used. Everything's on the website, outsideofskyline.com, if you're interested.
It'll definitely save you some time in the planning stages, save you some headaches, and it'll help make your trip like ours that much less stressful because you'll know, hey, before going on through no man's land, maybe we should top off our fuel and our water tanks. I really hope that this helps those of you considering Baja, Mexico. If you've been on the fence, if you've been like, oh, it sounds cool, but Mexico's kind of got a bad rep for not being so safe, go. It's an enjoyable trip. I mean, after having done it, we plan to go back, multiple times in the future. It was such a great experience. There's just so many good reasons why you should go, and it's cool because you have your home. With an RV, you have all of your comforts, but you also get to travel to a different country, different language, different currency, different culture. I
can't tell you how many times either Jesse was driving the RV or I was driving the truck somewhere, and we're like, this is our vehicle, and we're in Mexico. It was so neat, and just everything about Baja. We had not one bad experience that would deter us from going again.
Yeah. So.
Go, go, go!
We hope this was helpful for all of you. And hey, maybe we'll see you down in Mexico. See you guys.
Bye. Cool.
All right.